last few days with hundreds of others at Cambridge and tens of thousands nationally, because I believe very fundamentally in the point made powerfully by the former slave abolitionist and great writer Frederick Douglass, that power concedes nothing without a demand, that it never did and never will. This is the most important thing that we can teach our students, and the most important thing that we are learning from students and young people who are campaigning today and in the coming weeks to rid this country of a racist, xenophobic, anti-poor, anti-sick and disabled and fundamentally vicious government. Douglass was speaking in the context of anti-slavery, but of course he made his point deliberately generalizable because he understood very profoundly that tyranny and oppression, is that quote? Okay. Tyranny and oppression acts across a variety of domains, extracting and burdening, dividing and ruling. Anti-racism is indivisible. It is vital, therefore, that we see the linkages between the oppression of people of color and the oppression of so many others: women, sexual dissidents, the poor, the unemployed, the homeless, the disabled, and religious minorities, and that we join forces across a range of issues and conflicts. Anti-racism is often presented as special pleading, a special interest, or at best a matter of inclusivity, benevolently allowing Black and Asian people a place at the diversity table. In fact, anti-racism concerns us all because apart from anything else, we are up against the edifice of ideological neoliberalism, which, like the capitalism that undergirds it, relies on race and racism to operate and thrive. It was founded, as too many people don't like to remember, on the forcibly extracted, unremunerated labor of Black people, which may have been eventually abolished, but the dynamic of extracting labor widely for poor compensation and concentrating the profits in a few hands has not. It flourishes nourished by ongoing gendered, race and international divisions, which it attempts to mask by high-minded talk of inclusivity and shared prosperity. In this scheme, such things as ethnic and gender pay gaps are not unfortunate and incidental, but constitutive of the workings of a system that is not only fundamentally exploitative, but requires us to exist in atomized constituencies, pitting our causes against each other. We have to see through this, remind ourselves to see through this anew every day and join forces. What does this mean for us as union members and as students in solidarity with the strike? First of all, we have to reject, as we have, not only pay gaps and pension detriments, which we know to affect women and ethnic minorities and the disabled and the unwell disproportionately, but also that we refuse to act as border guards. We are teachers, not guards, and our understanding of teaching and learning is that the production and fostering of knowledge is fundamentally global in scope and always has been. Knowledge cannot accept segregation, line drawing, seclusion, separation, and surveillance. We do not accept the hostile environment. Knowledge cannot flourish in a hostile environment. This environment has seen not just some of our best researchers and colleagues isolated and targeted, but made life incredibly difficult for those who are here on work permits and student visas, denying them that most fundamental of rights, the right to protest and assert critical dissent. When our union and our pickets are denied the presence of so many fellow university members, we are directly affected by the hostile environment. We are also affected by the racist workings of Prevent, when students and colleagues, particularly our Muslim students and colleagues, are profiled as susceptible to extremism, and when our seminars and lectures are subjected to extremism assessments, while at the same time we fund precious JRFs for people writing quasi-philosophical and pseudo-intellectual apologetics for the most discredited forms of racial science. The university cannot and must not foster the kind of pseudoscience that not even 100 years ago was legitimating and sanctioning the oppression, murder, and cleansing of millions of our fellow human beings. We must stand vigilant against the weaponizing of migrants as explanation for austerity and immiseration, and the ways in which migrants and immigration have been turned into alibis, not just by mainstream politicians, but shamefully some high-profile union leaders with considerable political clout. To commit to anti-racism is to recall that there is no place for racism or xenophobia, the playing of race against class or migrants against the so-called traditional working classes in the labor movement. We must stand alongside climate justice movements and the deeply committed efforts here to bring the university to divest from fossil fuels. Not least because given the history of both capitalism and colonialism, the consequences of catastrophic changes in climate have already affected the global south disproportionately. We must acknowledge the leadership of indigenous peoples and campaigns in the global south in bringing us to greater awareness of ecological destruction and the need to act against it now. We must also put pressure on universities to end collaborations with the arms industry. This too is an industry premised on racism and genocide, as we can see from the fact that British arms industry is complicit today in raining death down upon thousands and thousands of Yemenis. The university cannot and must not be handmaiden to death and ethnic cleansing, not in our name.
Not in our name. Not in our name.
In recent years, Cambridge has taken a turn towards diversification of its student body, as it appears increasingly concerned with improving the historically low number of BME students. Until recently, it also appears to be committed to attracting a body of students from all over the world, with students successfully campaigning for bursaries for refugee scholars and positions for scholars in exile, not to mention the establishment of a Center for Global Human Movement. It also appears to be particularly concerned with this moment of migration and refuge. It was therefore surprising when a group of PhD students, myself included, recently learned about the platform the university provides to certain well-known violence-enabling and rights-abusing companies, not least one that has been subject to significant public scrutiny and media attention over the last couple of years. Palantir, a technology company set up by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, provides tools for predominantly intelligence organizations that includes the CIA. It is also one of the main architects of the infrastructure that the US Immigration Customs Enforcement used to detain, separate, and deport migrant populations. Palantir contracts with tyrannical actors like ICE, amongst others, providing software packages such as the investigative case management software and Falcon, which are used to investigate families and sponsors of children and to conduct workplace raids, which have been up 650% under the Trump administration alone. Thousands have been arrested just for being undocumented. Children have been left without parents overnight. And people who have lived in America for sometimes decades are being berated, detained, and deported. At any given moment in the US, at least 2,000 children are detained in inhumane conditions. And now they're coming for us. Palantir has recently entered a £1 million contract with the Ministry of Defense here in the UK, works with at least 14 police departments on predictive analytics technology, which asymmetrically affects our communities of color. Even the Cabinet Office contracts with Palantir. And this is not a purely UK phenomenon, or a US phenomenon for that matter. Leading companies like Palantir unchecked and providing them with safe havens at universities to recruit labor and partner on research projects erodes the safe havens higher education have historically provided for refugees, for the exiled, for the persecuted and the undesirable. Palantir recruits workers from elite UK institutions, including the University of Cambridge, where it awards student prizes for best dissertation and appears as a member of the Supporters Club at the Department of Computer Science and Technology, for which it pays an annual fee. Now, we demand that the Computer Science Department cancel any future engagement with Palantir. We cannot, in good conscience, claim to solve some of the world's most pressing problems as a leading university while enabling the marginalization of people who have fled or are fleeing conflict, persecution, and hunger. Our student body includes refugees and migrants from across the globe. In standing together against Palantir, we stand in solidarity with them. Thank you.
I think when you look like me, when you're not born with a fair skin, fair hair, you don't have a British or a European passport, although Hugo will talk a minute about EU citizens, you are automatically disadvantaged. And very likely every week you will hear a sentence like, oh, you're Egyptian, so how did you make it to the West? And the British lady next to me, she'd say, by plane. Sadly, not everything is so funny. I was in an event where I didn't want to drink, and a very established academic would look to me in front of a room filled with people. Oh, but I thought you renounced your Islam. No joke, he was serious. And when I said no, also you're a communist. And you hear all these sentences, and sometimes it's actually very freaky when you're, I think Priya touched, and Hugo will talk a lot about as well visa issues. You're already paying a lot on your visa. You're already paying a lot to be here. You're paying, again, NHS for some reason when you do the, although you pay it every month. But then you have someone from the administration saying, if you were just European, all of this would not have happened. And you're freaking already in that office thinking, shit, will I get deported? Because I have to get this contract quickly before the other one ends. And all the things you go through. So it is not just about things that are distant from us. We experience that every week. We would very likely, if you're, I mean, I'm lucky because in a sense, if I'm not wearing what I'm wearing, I will not necessarily look Egyptian. So I fit in. Oh, but you're integrated. These words that are absolutely annoying because I'm a very proud Egyptian Muslim. And I'm very proud to be here.
You might be wondering as well, how come a white guy is speaking in a rally about racism and migrants? I will wrap up in a minute. One, because since I was an adolescent, I've been campaigning against racism way back when the only name I recognized in British Parliament was that of a certain Jeremy Corbyn, who would sign up everything against racism. And two, you might have noticed that I'm a migrant myself. I'm a continental, or as we are known now, an European. And I'm part of the 3.6 million Europeans who are now integrated in the most successful Tory program so far. It's called the hostile environment. We all belong, we are all eligible for it, and we now, actually, according to the words of the Tories themselves, of conservative leaders who are adopting the agenda of the far right, we are eligible for deportation. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people who do not have unions, who do not have fancy Cambridge associations, who are your fruit pickers, your drivers, your cleaners, who keep this country running. So when you enter those polling centers coming Sunday, I think it's the 12th, think of this, think of us as well, think of the country you want to build. If you want to build this country based on hatred, racism, and persecution of migrants, or if you want a better, fairer country for all. Thank you.
We're here from Kusi Women's Campaign. We just want to say that we stand in complete solidarity with all the strikers, and we recognise the need for active solidarity, whether that be signing these petitions, whether that be standing on the picket lines with you on the freezing mornings. We need it. We need to stand together on this. We know that these fights are not individual, that they are intersectional. Yeah.
And also to say that the Women's Campaign stands against Prevent and the oppression being perpetrated by that policy throughout our universities. And the Women's Campaign stands with all forms of anti-racist organising within our universities and within our society generally, while recognising that anti-racist organising must not be used as a banner to cover up other abuses of other marginalised groups, as has been the case with the SWP. And the Women's Campaign stands with FLY in total solidarity, and with all of the strikers and all of the action over the last week. Whose university?
Our university!
Yo, it's striking. So no man's doing up UCU, because you know man's striking. Now listen. Yo, high frequency, bro. It's a high frequency. Yo, look, I'm striking. See, no man's doing up UCU, because you know I'm striking. Like Stephen 2, can you hear me? Because you know I'm striking. Like teach a lesson when you got pensions, you know I'm striking. You know, bro, cut the beat. I'm gonna do it a cappella. Alright, listen, we're striking. Oh, snap, okay, damn. Bourgeoisie speaker. Alright, fair. Alright, come on, fam. We're striking. See, now man's doing up UCU because you know man's striking. Like Stephen 2, can you hear me, boo, because you know man's striking. Like teach me a lesson, we need better pencils, you know man's striking. You know man's striking. Man's up doing up strike with uncle, my bridge market to get down money. 0 hour gives you no power. See, why do you think the guns are happy? Them man try to sell the broke by the Trinity, owner of the O2 Lando. See, my uncle sort of work that's no more trips than Nando's. What? Get ready and go. I'm striking in any condition. Something like Jenny and Joe. Gender pay gap, I don't rate that. Fam, I don't even know. Born in Cambridge, I don't rate this. Injustice has to go. Look.
Yo, we're striking. See, now man's doing up UCU. You see man striking. Like Stephen 2, can you hear me, bro?